there's something quietly profound happening in your mind right now. As you absorb these words, your brain isn't just processing information. It's building connections, questioning assumptions, spinning possibilities into intricate webs of meaning. While most people hear a sentence and move on, you might find yourself 3 layers deep, analysing not just what was said, but why it was said, what it implies, and how it connects to 17 other thoughts you had yesterday. Welcome to the psychology of deep thinking, where your mind operates less like a calculator and more like a philosopher's workshop. You know that feeling when someone asks you a simple question, and suddenly your brain launches into a full expedition. They want to know if you enjoyed the movie, but you're already dissecting the cinematography, the underlying themes, the director's childhood trauma that probably influenced the third act. By the time you circle back to their question, they've moved on to discussing weekend plans, and you're left wondering if you think too much. The answer isn't that you think too much, it's that you think differently. Deep thinkers don't just live in the world, they excavate it. Where others see a conversation, you see subtext. Where others notice weather, you contemplate the intricate systems that created this particular moment of atmospheric pressure. Your mind doesn't skim the surface of experience, it dives, explores, connects dots that others don't even notice exist. And that difference, that fundamental shift in how you process reality, shapes everything about how you move through life. Psychologists have a term for this cognitive style. They call it elaborative processing, but that clinical phrase doesn't capture the true nature of what's happening in your mind. When you encounter new information, your brain doesn't just file it away. It immediately begins asking questions. How does this connect to what I already know? What are the implications? What if the opposite were true? What assumptions am I making? This isn't overthinking in the problematic sense. This is your mind doing what it was designed to do, just more thoroughly than most. The difference becomes apparent in how you approach problems. While others might see a challenge and immediately jump to solutions, your mind first wants to understand the architecture of the problem itself. You question whether the problem is actually the problem, or if it's a symptom of something deeper. You examine it from multiple angles, considering factors that others might dismiss as irrelevant. This process takes longer, yes, but it often leads to insights that completely reframe the situation. Take relationships, for instance. When a friend cancels plans, most people might feel briefly disappointed, and then move on. But your mind begins constructing narratives. Are they pulling away? Is this part of a pattern? What did I say in our last conversation that might have triggered this? You're not paranoid, you're pattern seeking. Your brain is designed to find connections, to understand the deeper currents beneath surface interactions. Sometimes this leads to profound insights about people and relationships. Other times, it creates complexity where simplicity might serve you better. This same cognitive style influences how you consume information. You can't just read an article or watch a documentary without your mind automatically generating follow-up questions. You find yourself researching the author's background, cross-referencing facts, wondering about the information that wasn't included. A simple news story becomes a launching point for understanding entire systems, historical contexts, psychological motivations. What others might see as going down rabbit holes, you experience as natural intellectual curiosity. In conversations, this depth of processing creates a unique dynamic. While others might engage in what psychologists call small talk, exchanging surface-level information and social pleasantries, your mind is constantly seeking deeper connection. You're listening not just to words, but to tone, to what's not being said, to the emotions beneath the statements. This makes you an exceptional listener when people need to be truly heard, but it can also make casual social interactions feel shallow or unfulfilling. Your relationship with time operates differently too, where others might experience events as discrete moments. Your mind creates continuity, connecting past experiences to present situations and extrapolating possible futures. A comment someone made 3 months ago might suddenly become relevant to today's conversation. You remember not just what happened, but how it felt, what it meant, how it changed your understanding of something else entirely. This temporal connectivity gives you a rich, layered experience of life, but it can also make it difficult to let go of past hurts or stop worrying about future possibilities. The way you approach learning reveals another fascinating aspect of deep thinking. You rarely accept information at face value. Instead, you automatically begin building frameworks, looking for underlying principles, questioning the source and methodology. A history lesson becomes an exploration of human nature. A scientific fact triggers questions about the research process, the cultural context that shaped the questions being asked, the implications for other fields entirely. This approach to learning is incredibly thorough, but it can also make traditional educational environments feel frustrating or limiting. Decision-making becomes a complex process when your mind naturally considers multiple variables and long-term implications. While others might choose a restaurant based on convenience or preference, you're weighing factors like supporting local businesses, the environmental impact of different food choices, whether the atmosphere will facilitate the kind of conversation you want to have, how the decision aligns with your values. This comprehensive approach often leads to decisions you feel genuinely good about, but it can also create decision paralysis when the stakes feel high. Your emotional landscape operates with similar complexity. Where others might experience anger and move on, you're analysing the source of that anger, its relationship to past experiences, what it reveals about your values or boundaries, how it might inform future interactions. Emotions become data points in a larger understanding of yourself and your relationships with others. This emotional intelligence is a tremendous gift, but it can also mean that feelings last longer, cut deeper, and require more processing time than others might expect or understand. The creative process reveals yet another dimension of deep thinking. When you're generating ideas, your mind doesn't just brainstorm obvious solutions. It makes unexpected connections, draws from seemingly unrelated experiences, asks questions that reshape the entire creative challenge. You might start working on one project and find yourself 3 hours later, having discovered connections to philosophy, childhood memories, and social justice issues you've been contemplating. This associative creativity often produces innovative solutions, but it can also make it difficult to stay focused on straightforward tasks. Sleep and rest take on different meanings when your mind operates at this level of complexity. While others might unwind by watching television or scrolling through social media, your brain continues processing, connecting, analysing. The thoughts that arise during quiet moments aren't random. They're your mind continuing its work of integration and understanding. This can make traditional relaxation techniques less effective, requiring you to find peace not through mental emptiness, but through engaging with ideas and questions that genuinely fascinate you. The physical world becomes richer when filtered through a mind that seeks depth and connection. A walk through the neighbourhood isn't just exercise, it's an opportunity to notice architectural details, consider urban planning decisions, observe human behaviour, contemplate the intersection of nature and civilization. Beauty reveals itself not just in obvious forms, but in patterns, in unexpected juxtapositions, in the stories that objects and spaces seem to tell about the people who shaped them. This way of thinking influences how you relate to routine and structure. While some people find comfort in predictable patterns, your mind craves novelty and complexity. Routine tasks become opportunities for reflection, problem-solving, creative thinking. Even mundane activities can become rich with meaning when your mind is actively engaged with questions and possibilities. This mental engagement can make boring tasks more bearable, but it can also make it difficult to appreciate the simple peace that comes from not thinking deeply about everything. Your relationship with certainty operates on a fundamentally different level than most people experience. Where others might accept conventional wisdom or popular opinions without much examination, your mind automatically begins deconstructing these accepted truths. You find yourself questioning not just whether something is accurate, but why it became accepted as truth in the first place. Who benefits from this belief? What historical context shaped this understanding? What evidence supports it? And more importantly, what evidence might challenge it? This intellectual skepticism isn't cynicism, it's a genuine desire to understand the world as it actually is, rather than as others have told you it should be. The paradox of deep thinking reveals itself in moments of supposed simplicity. Someone might suggest a straightforward solution to a complex problem, and while you can see the appeal of that simplicity, your mind immediately begins mapping out the unintended consequences, the variables they haven't considered, the assumptions built into their approach. You're not trying to be difficult or contrarian. Your brain simply cannot ignore the complexity that others seem able to overlook. This makes you incredibly valuable in situations that require thorough analysis, but it can also create friction in environments that prioritize speed over depth. Your internal dialogue runs like a constant background process, questioning, analyzing, making connections that others might never consider. When someone mentions their changing careers, Most people might offer encouragement or ask practical questions about timing or finances. But your mind starts exploring the psychological factors that drive career dissatisfaction, the societal pressures that shape our definitions of success, the courage required to remake your identity in midlife. These deeper currents fascinate you because they reveal something profound about human nature and the structures we've built around our lives. This cognitive style creates a unique relationship with boredom. While others might feel restless when faced with unstimulating environments, your mind can find endless fascination in almost any situation. A delayed flight becomes an opportunity to observe human behavior under stress. A mundane work meeting transforms into a study of group dynamics and organizational psychology. Even standing in line at the grocery store offers chances to contemplate economic systems, consumer behavior, the stories written on people's faces. Your mind doesn't need external entertainment because it's constantly generating its own intellectual stimulation. The way you process media and information reveals another layer of this cognitive complexity. You can't watch a documentary without researching the filmmakers, reading critiques from different perspectives, seeking out primary sources. A podcast episode might send you down a research spiral that lasts for days, not because you're procrastinating, but because one idea legitimately connects to another, which connects to another, creating a web of understanding that feels more valuable than any single piece of content. This approach to information consumption is incredibly enriching, but it also means you consume less content overall because you're going so much deeper with each piece. Social situations become exercises in multi-layered awareness. While engaging in conversation, you're simultaneously reading body language, noticing what topics people avoid, sensing the emotional undercurrents that others seem to miss entirely. You pick up on the slight hesitation before someone answers a question, the way their voice changes when discussing certain subjects, the disconnect between their words and their energy. This social intelligence makes you a gifted counselor and friend. But it can also be exhausting because you're processing so much more information than a typical social interaction seems to require. Your relationship with productivity and achievement differs markedly from conventional approaches. While others might focus on completing tasks efficiently, your mind is drawn toward understanding why the task matters, how it fits into larger systems, what it reveals about priorities and values. A work project becomes an exploration of organizational culture, industry trends, human motivation. This depth of engagement often leads to higher quality outcomes, but it can also make it challenging to meet deadlines or satisfy managers who prioritize quantity over insight. The experience of reading becomes something entirely different when your mind naturally seeks connections and implications. You can't encounter a new idea without immediately considering how it relates to your existing knowledge, what it might mean for fields you care about, how it challenges or confirms your current understanding. A single paragraph might trigger hours of reflection, not because you're slow, but because you're genuinely engaged with the ideas at a level that most readers never reach. Books become conversations rather than just information transfers. Your memory operates more like a vast network than a simple filing system. Instead of storing isolated facts, your mind creates rich associations between experiences, emotions, ideas, and observations. A particular smell might trigger not just a memory, but an entire cascade of connected thoughts about family dynamics, cultural traditions, the psychology of nostalgia, the neuroscience of memory formation. These associative chains create a deeply textured experience of remembering, where past and present feel intimately connected. The challenge of living with this cognitive style becomes apparent in a world that often values quick responses over thoughtful analysis. You might find yourself still processing a question long after others have moved on to new topics. In meetings, while colleagues offer immediate reactions, you're considering multiple angles, potential consequences, underlying assumptions. By the time you've formulated a truly thoughtful response, the conversation has shifted 3 times. This isn't a deficiency in your thinking, it's evidence of its thoroughness. Your relationship with uncertainty reveals another dimension of deep thinking. Where others might feel comfortable with ambiguous situations or unanswered questions, your mind continues working on these puzzles long after others have accepted the mystery. You're driven not by a need for control, but by genuine curiosity about how things work, why they happen, what patterns might emerge if you look closely enough. This persistence often leads to insights that others miss, but it can also create mental fatigue when some questions simply cannot be answered. The way you approach conflict and disagreement reflects this same depth of processing. When someone disagrees with you, your first instinct isn't to defend your position, but to understand theirs more completely. What experiences led them to this conclusion? What values inform their perspective? Where might you both be partially correct? This approach often leads to more productive conversations, but it can also be frustrating when others seem content with surface-level disagreements, rather than exploring the deeper sources of different viewpoints. Your creative process operates through this same lens of complexity and connection. Ideas don't emerge in isolation, but as part of larger networks of understanding. A single creative project might incorporate insights from psychology, history, personal experience, current events, and philosophical questions you've been pondering for years. This integrative approach creates work with unusual depth and resonance, but it can also make it difficult to produce simple, straightforward creative outputs when that's what the situation requires. The relationship between deep thinking and identity becomes particularly complex because your sense of self isn't built on simple narratives or clear-cut roles. While others might define themselves through their job, their relationships, or their achievements, your identity emerges from this ongoing process of questioning, analyzing, and connecting. You are, in many ways, the sum of your curiosities, the embodiment of your questions rather than your answers. This makes for a rich inner life, but it can also create a sense of not quite fitting into the boxes that society creates for people. Your approach to problem solving reveals yet another layer of this cognitive difference. When faced with a challenge, your mind doesn't immediately jump to solutions. Instead, it first wants to understand the ecosystem surrounding the problem. What created this situation? What factors are maintaining it? What would happen if we changed this variable or that assumption? You're drawn to root causes rather than surface fixes, which often leads to more sustainable solutions but can frustrate people who want immediate action. The way you experience empathy operates at this same level of complexity. When someone shares their struggles with you, you don't just feel sympathy for their current situation. Your mind automatically begins constructing understanding about their background, their patterns, the systemic factors that might have contributed to their difficulties. You feel their pain, but you also see the larger context that shapes their experience. This makes you an incredibly insightful friend, but it can also mean that you carry emotional weight that others don't even realize exists. Your relationship with technology and digital spaces reflects this same tendency toward depth over breadth. While others might scroll through social media consuming hundreds of pieces of content, you find yourself deeply engaged with just a few posts, following links, reading comments, researching the people and ideas mentioned. A single article might lead you to spend hours exploring related concepts, not because you're avoiding other tasks, but because genuine learning feels more valuable than superficial consumption. The experience of making decisions about your future carries unique complexity when your mind naturally considers long-term implications and interconnected systems. Career choices aren't just about salary or prestige, they're about alignment with your values, contribution to society, opportunities for continued learning, impact on your relationships, environmental considerations. A simple decision about where to live becomes an exploration of community dynamics, cultural values, economic factors, lifestyle implications. This thoroughness often leads to choices you feel genuinely good about, but it can also make major life transitions feel overwhelming. Your internal sense of time operates differently because your mind creates such rich connections between past, present, and future. Memories don't feel like distant events, but like accessible experiences that inform your current understanding. Future possibilities feel vivid and immediate because you can trace the logical pathways from current circumstances to potential outcomes. This temporal awareness gives you perspective that others often lack, but it can also make it difficult to live fully in present moments. The way you process criticism and feedback reveals another dimension of deep thinking. When someone offers a critique, your mind doesn't just hear their specific comments. It begins analyzing their perspective, their motivations, their blind spots, how their feedback connects to patterns you've noticed in other relationships. You consider not just whether their criticism is accurate, but what it reveals about communication styles, power dynamics, the cultural contexts that shape how people give and receive feedback. This comprehensive processing often leads to genuine growth, but it can also make criticism feel more intense and longer lasting than others experience. Your relationship with routine and habit formation operates through this lens of complexity and meaning making. You can't just adopt a new practice because someone recommends it. Your mind needs to understand why it works, how it connects to your larger goals, what psychological principles it leverages, how it might interact with other aspects of your life. This thorough approach often leads to sustainable changes because you've built genuine understanding rather than just following instructions. But it can also make it harder to implement simple improvements quickly. The experience of consuming entertainment becomes richer and more complex when your mind naturally seeks layers of meaning. You can't just watch a movie for relaxation. Your brain is analysing character development, narrative structure, cultural messages, cinematographic choices, the director's other work, the historical context of the story. A simple television show becomes a window into social dynamics, psychological patterns, artistic techniques. This depth of engagement creates incredibly rich experiences, but it can also make it difficult to simply enjoy light entertainment without intellectual stimulation. Your approach to health and wellness reflects this same pattern of seeking understanding rather than just following advice. You don't just want to know what foods are healthy, you want to understand the research behind nutritional recommendations, the economic factors that shape food production, the cultural influences on eating patterns, the psychological aspects of dietary change. Exercise becomes exploration of movement science, stress physiology, the social dynamics of fitness culture. This comprehensive approach often leads to more sustainable lifestyle changes, but it can also create analysis paralysis when simple action might be more beneficial. So if you recognize yourself in this exploration of deep thinking, know that your mind isn't broken or excessive. It's simply operating at a different frequency, one that seeks meaning beneath surfaces, connections across seemingly unrelated domains. Your tendency to excavate rather than skim, to question rather than accept, to see patterns where others see chaos. This isn't overthinking. This is your cognitive signature, your particular way of engaging with the complexity that surrounds us all. The world needs minds like yours, ones willing to dive deeper, think longer, question harder. Your depth is your gift.